Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That's a little loud in that view, so. I'm Steve Cheney. I'm the CEO of the American Security Project, and I want to welcome you this morning to our great lecturer, Dr. Mohamed Aboulghar. He's the founder and leader of the Egyptian Social Democratic Party. Let me talk for just a second about the American Security Project and what our interest is in Egypt. We were founded in 2005 by Senators Kerry, Hart, Hagel, and Rudman. And their interest was national security. And when they brought up certain issues like climate change, nuclear security, energy security, asymmetric operations, terrorism, they usually got painted as leaning one way or the other in the political spectrum. And their objection to that was there were a lot of people here in this country that weren't listening to the facts surrounding any of those issues. So their thought was to put together a small nonprofit organization that would have an equal number of Republicans and Democrats on it, a number of businessmen and women, and then have 7 or 8 what we call flag officers, generals and admirals, 3- and 4-star, who feel passionately about all these issues, who could discuss them from a national security perspective. And it's been somewhat successful since then. Among our major successes, we believe, are helping pass the New START Treaty and raising to a level of public dialogue on factually about issues that are going on, not just in this country, but worldwide. And of course, high among them is asymmetric operations, terrorism, and stability in the Middle East. I'm sure everybody in here knows that Egypt has been a long ally of the United States, a good one and a trusted one. It's had some very interesting times over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years in particular. We at the American Security Project have a particular interest in the stability in the Middle East and certainly stability in Egypt. And we would like to feel that things are headed in the right direction. I myself was with a group that went to Cairo in December and met with a number of government officials and non-government officials, to include Amri Moussa, who helped write the new constitution. I read it. We saw what was going on there. I personally believe that what you see a lot in the press is somewhat exaggerated and harps in a lot of cases on the negative and not the positive. And perhaps we can have a more stimulating conversation about this, but you're not here to hear about me, you're here to hear from Dr. Aboulghar. As I mentioned, founder and leader of the Egyptian Social Democratic Party. We all know that the presidential elections are coming up. I believe you told me it's 26 and 27 May, and then followed by parliamentary elections, probably October, November-ish time frame. I'm sure everybody's familiar with General al-Sisi, who has just resigned, and he is probably, no doubt, is going to run for election here. So there's a number of questions that I would like to ask Dr. Aboulghar. He heads, of course, the Egyptian Social Democratic Party, and he's got quite a history in Egypt. He's got his doctoral degree from the Cairo University. He helped find or ran the Egyptian Revolution of 2011, where he demanded democratization of Egyptian universities. And he's been very active in political activities in Egypt since 2011. With that, let me introduce Dr. Aboulghar. What I'd like to do is let him make comments for however long you please, 10 minutes or so. Then I'm going to have a conversation between the two of us. Then I'll open up to Q&A. The way we run this on the Q&A is we do have a roving microphone, and we are recording this. It's all on the record. We will put it up on our website probably this afternoon or tomorrow. When I ask you to ask a question, if you could please keep your comment fairly short and ask a question, and then we'll try to answer it and have a brief civil dialogue here. With that, let me turn it over to Dr. Aboulghar. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here to ASP, and I'd like to thank all the organizers. And let me first, in half a minute, say that I don't represent the Egyptian government. I've never been representing the Egyptian government before. I've always been in opposition for 20 years during the Mubarak period, and I opposed the SCAF, and I oppose the Muslim Brothers. And right now, with the interim government, I oppose them in certain items. I agree with other items. So I was actually in the opposition practically all my life. I'm not going to talk about the past because this is a very long story and I don't think we are out of the scope of this. I'm only going to talk about the future and the near future of Egypt. The first thing, a few words about the constitution. I think that the current constitution, which was approved by Egyptian people by an overwhelming majority, is the best ever constitution we had in Egypt. In the section related to freedom and rights, it is as good as the French constitution when I compared it. The representation of the people in the committee of the constitution was not based on Islamic and non-Islamic as it was the case in the 212 constitution. It was based upon different groups representing different strata of the society, syndicates, parties, women, NGOs. The Muslim Islamic parties were invited to join. The Salafis came, but the Muslim brothers did not refuse to join the organization. We spent around 3 months, 5 days a week, and sometimes 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, working on the constitution until finally we came up with this constitution. I agreed on over 95% of the articles. I refused some articles, and I was very vocal negatively about some of the articles, but the majority of the committee agreed them, and of course we have to all accept the majority. Then we came to the referendum. There were some negative things about the referendum, particularly in campaigning. Campaigning was not very complicated because the Muslim brothers announced it from the very beginning that they are not going to join this referendum and they are going to boycott it. However, there were few people who wanted to campaign and ask people to say no, and few of them were prevented from doing this. But the yes campaign was very, very strong, but the polling itself was completely fair and was monitored by European Union, by some American groups, by many NGOs in Egypt, and there was no irregularities in the polling itself or counting the ballots. But I want to draw your attention to very important points which I actually deducted and made during my train trip from New York this morning. The most important point in the results of the referendum is that 39% of the people who have the right to vote turned out, they came and voted in this. And this is, by any measure, the highest ever in the Egyptian history. In the last referendum, in 2012, it was 32% the turnout. And the difference is much more than this 7%. Because in the 32%, Muslim brothers were very vigorous in their campaign in attending. The Salafis were very vigorous. We seculars were also campaigning very strongly. And finally, only 32% of people came. But the 39% turnout in the referendum excluded 3 groups. Muslim brothers, big part of the Salafis, and many young people, secular young people, Egyptians. He didn't like the whole idea or what's going on. So the real turnout should be much more than this. The implications of this turnout could be actually, if you want to just look at the figures, you will say that the secular vote in the 2012 elections was 11.8% of the people who are eligible to vote. Out of these 32% who came, 36% were secular vote. This represented only 11.8% of the people who are right to vote. We did all we could by all campaigning, asking people to go and say no for the Muslim Brothers constitution, and that was all we got. Now we have 39% secular votes. So this huge difference between the secular votes in only in 1 year means you can have several explanations, but the most important explanation is that huge percentage of the Egyptian people who never ever voted before, they went to the polls for this referendum because maybe they liked the constitution, maybe they were scared from losing the identity of Egypt, maybe they don't want the Muslim Brothers to come again, but for any reason, the Egyptian people were really motivated to come, and if we can attract this big portion of Egyptian people to come, the Muslim Brothers and the Islamists will never ever win any free elections in Egypt, and they will be only represented by the 15, at most 20% of the votes in anything. The last year there were syndicate elections. The Muslim Brothers completely had 100% of the seats since the late 70s and early 80s, doctor, syndicate, engineer, name it, all of them. They didn't lose one seat. The first time they started losing seats, it was during Morsi's presidency, and the only reason because the seculars went to elections and voted. And lately, they lost all syndicates, and these are the real most fair elections, syndicates. They lost all the elections, and the only reason, because instead of only 5% of the members going, it went up to 18%, not to 50 or 60. So by just having 20% of the people voting, then the Muslim Brothers were out. They are very well organized, disciplined, they all go to the polls. They never miss, none of them will miss anything. I made this calculation during my training trip now, and now we are having the presidential elections, and I was not sure that Sisi is going to run or not, actually, because of this long procedure, but although I was told by several people that he decided some weeks ago to run, but anyway, now he is officially running and the date of the elections is fixed, and I prefer to leave this part to the questions and answers, and then the parliamentary elections, which to my mind is more important than the presidential election, because in the first time in the Egyptian history, the parliament will have a power as strong as the president. For the first time since '52, the president cannot dissolve the parliament. The president cannot appoint a prime minister without approval of the parliament. He cannot kick the prime minister unless the parliament agrees this and gives a vote of no confidence to the prime minister. He cannot even kick one minister or anybody. So there is a real good balance of power in the new constitution, and there is also one article, new article for impeachment of the Egyptian president, which was never present in any previous constitution, that if 2/3 of the parliament members, they can ask for impeachment, there will be a referendum, and if the majority of Egyptians decide yes, then there will be new presidential elections. If the people say no, the parliament will be dissolved, and there will be new parliamentary elections to avoid people using this thing for just political tricks. Of course, we have major problems ahead of us. The economy is number one, unemployment, and with tourism and its related problems, and then sorting out the polarization in Egypt and Islamists in Egypt, and how can we overcome the problem, ongoing problem, and having Egypt working together again for the future. Thank you.
Well, Doctor, thank you. I know you're the leader of the Egyptian Social Democratic Party. So when you hear of an announcement from General al-Sisi that he's running, and of course I've been there and I know he's fairly popular, who's going to run against him?
So far, only one candidate, which is Hamdin Sabahi. He is a politician since he was 18-year-old in the Cairo University, and he was elected as the chairman of student union at that time. Since then, he was in the politics. He was several members of parliament member. He ran in the last elections, presidential elections, and he actually got over 4 million votes, which was very close, substantial, very close to what Morsi got and Shafiq, the two contenders who he was very close to be one of those who is going to go into the re-election. A word about our party, that our party is a new party formed after the revolution, so we are only 2 years old. We are based on the similarity to North European social democratic parties. We believe in free market economy, competition, but we want to have taxation which allows investment and meanwhile gives an opportunity for the government to have money to provide for good education and health.
Will your party nominate somebody from them to run against General al-Sisi?
We, in 2012, we did local elections, and we could not reach a decision. No one had a majority, so the decision was every member of the party will vote for the candidate they like out of the 5 main contenders. This time, the decision will be taken after they close the period for people who want to run for election. It's too early to decide. I know other parties already decided and announced that they are going to vote for Sisi, and one party, the Nasserid party, announced that they are going to vote for Hamdin Sabahi, but we are truly a democratic party. I am not allowed, and I cannot really decide, and I don't know what will happen.
So you're not going to have a primary system to elect somebody to run against General al-Sisi?
From our party, no. We are not going to have somebody to write, but the party's position during the elections, well, it is, I don't know yet.
Considerable controversy, of course, surrounding Muslim Brotherhood and its involvement in politics, and the presumption is, of course, that they cannot nominate somebody from the Brotherhood specifically to run. Is that accurate?
Well, the Brotherhood in Egypt, there is a decision from the cabinet, and I think also from some court, that they are a terrorist organization. But the party, Freedom and Justice Party, is not banned in Egypt.
So they could nominate?
They could nominate. But from what I have seen, it looks like they are going again to boycott, as if what happened with the referendum in the Constitution, it looks like that it will happen in the presidential election, but of course it's up to them.
Sure. Of course, we all expect and hope that you would have a calm election process and not have any unrest surrounding it. And of course, I hope that's the case. What's your view of the stability currently in Cairo and in Egypt, and how safe everybody is?
Well, Egypt used to be a very secure country, a very safe country. And compared to what we were, of course, now Egypt is not very safe and not very secure. But this is relative. I mean, you can walk, anybody can walk in the streets of Cairo all the time, even in the evening, and nothing happens, and in the countryside in different areas. But there are some areas where there are Muslim Brother demonstrations, and usually there are problems between them and the police. And in this area, during this episode, it could be dangerous to be there.
I'm fond of saying when I was there in December, we could go anywhere we wanted to go in Cairo. But there are places you probably didn't want to go in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Just like here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
There's places you don't want to go in the middle of the night either, I can guarantee you that. With that, I'd like to open it up to any questions you might have in the audience. If you could please just raise a hand. I've got a mic I'll bring around. If you could identify yourself, ask a fairly short question, and we'll hopefully have a conversation between the three of us. Anybody with a specific question or comment that you might have for Dr. Aboulghar? If not, I hope I've not stunned you all to silence. Yes, ma'am, right here. Can you bring the microphone to this young lady?
Thank you. We just sometimes feel lost. We don't know who to believe. As far as the killing of Mayana Ashraf, some people say she was killed by the Muslim Brotherhood. Others says she was killed by police. Well, can you tell us anything that you know that we don't know, because we cannot believe the press anymore?
No, I really don't know. I really don't know, and I can't believe both. I mean, I have seen the Muslim Brothers commenting on many things all through my life and all his lives. And I have also seen the Egyptian police doing the same. So it is extremely difficult to really judge on this.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions or comments? This could be a short event. Yeah. A question on this side?
Hi, I'm Paul Hamill from ASP. You mentioned that after the election it will be important to look at the polarization of politics and people in Egypt. What is your view of how Egyptians bring in the opposition groups to forge a stronger Egypt?
Well, I believe that the polarization currently present in Egypt should come to an end, because otherwise Egypt will not continue. The problem now is that one of the reasons why it is not possible to have reconciliation is the presence of huge amounts of arms which are being extensively used both in Sinai and in the valley, in different parts of Egypt. We all know that the Muslim Brothers historically carried weapons, assassinated prime ministers, and the president tried to assassinate another president, big judges, etc. But for the last 3 decades, the Muslim Brothers announced clearly that they are not going to carry any weapons anymore. But what happened is that many splinter movements came out of the Muslim Brothers. And they have different names, like Jama'ah Islamiyah, like, I don't know, different groups. These groups were all originally coming out of the Muslim Brothers, and they are all armed, and they did horrible things to Egypt in the 90s when they killed tourists when they there. The story of having those groups separate from the Muslim Brothers, which I personally believed for a long time, during President Morsi's period, I started to doubt this very much when I saw in the Cairo Stadium, in a big celebration, one of the people who assassinated the late President Sadat was let out of prison hand in hand with the president among thousands of supporters. I have seen tens of people who killed Egyptians in different occasions out of prison, leaders of those small splinter together hand in hand in a big, huge rally on the last 6th of October. So I started to think again. Well, this is not true. The Muslim Brothers, maybe they are not really carrying weapons, but they have another groups who are carrying weapons in different names, but closely related to them. The huge amount of weapons and terrorists who are present in Sinai and multiplied by 100 during the year of Morsi government must ring a bell to anybody who think about the terrorism and the danger of these groups, and that the complete separation, there is a big doubt about this now.
Yes, sir, over here on the far right.
Thank you, Dr. Mohamed, and thanks to ASP. My name is Aboulghar, and I work in social media for Somalia and Horn of Africa. And I have a connection with Egypt because this is where I went to school, where I grew up from elementary, middle, and high school. So this is where my interests. I have still friends there, and I have good members there. My question, I have two questions. One is the current situation in the Horn of Africa, and Turkey, Egypt, they have been a big part for the past 20 years of the devastation in Somalia. Lately, the Egyptian government, they put the full ambassador to Bashir, like the Turkish, and there was a visit by the generals from the military as well as the ambassador himself, and the talk is now that the Egyptian government will help Somalia to regenerate and start the military and renovate the bases in Somalia. And a lot of, especially the Somali diaspora, they are afraid the problem between Ethiopia and Somalia over Ogadennia and the Egypt's interest into the building of the dam inside Ethiopia. So what's your intake into that? Could that lead a war again in a region that's already in a big trouble? My second question is about the media itself, and I watch very closely what's going on in Egypt, and I'm very appalled the way that the media is portrayed now in Egypt, and the CBC and the money that's coming from the Gulf area, the brainwash of the Egyptian population, and Parliamentary that I watch where Mr. Yusuf Basim is mocking and making, and it's very interesting how you see where the people have been brainwashed and talking about things that even a normal person cannot even believe in Egypt, let alone the population that I know. It's not the Egypt that I grew up in. Thank you very much.
Well, concerning the first question, I'm not an expert in Somalia and what's going on there, but I know that there's a big mess in Somalia now, and the whole country is divided, and there are different types of militias who are, so I welcome very much that if the Egyptian government is going to support some form of help to Somalia to be re-established again as a united country and centrally governed. But I don't know any really details about any interference in the local government or what's going on in Somalia. I have no idea about this. Concerning the media in Egypt, as you may know, and you have lived in Egypt all your life, the media in Egypt were practically, totally owned by the government for a very, very long period. And it was only in the 80s where some very slim part of the media was allowed to go to the private sector. However, in the 90s and after the revolution, after 2011, the private media became much bigger, much stronger, and more influential than the governmental media. Although the governmental media is much, much bigger, they have 10,000 more the number of employees, but their influence became very, very small. The private media is owned by private people, and those private people, they have their own agenda, and each one of them is directing the media in the direction he likes, exactly the same as the government have their own media, and they are directing the media in the direction the government likes. So that's why also the media is polarized. And in between this, you have to be clever enough to really know what's going on. There are some very respectable programs and respectable media people who produce respectable, and people trust them and to listen to them. And because the number of the talk shows became enormous, viewers now are less and less. People start to be tired from all this, and I think by time their influence will gradually decrease.
Now, let me see if I understood you correctly. After 2011, the media became more privatized.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
So that was underneath Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood.
It was also because after that, the people in Tahrir said we must have a free media. So even before Morsi came, I mean from the time of the SCAF, the media, new channels opened, new, and continued during Morsi and after until now.
Given this modern age, once that genie is out of the bottle of social media, I mean, do you not feel you can't stop it? I mean,
yes,
the government can put certain restrictions on the media and social media, but with satellites and Facebook and
yes.
YouTube, and it's just going to go.
You are right. They cannot control it. They cannot do anything about it anymore.
And trust me, in the United States, we've got enough media that has its own agenda. You see it every day here too.
I mean, we follow your media because we can see the satellites, all your satellites. We see them in Cairo.
Yes, all the way on the left.
Good morning, General Kennedy.
You grab the mic there.
Good morning, General. And I want to thank you for the presentation on Scott working with Revolving Enterprises. I also have a two-part question. First part is regarding during the Morsi government, we saw that the Coptic Christians were used as pawns in the struggle between the security forces and the Brotherhood. Can you give us an update on the current status and how safe they are? And the second part is we saw that the Morsi government actually tried to improve relations with President Bashir in Sudan. I was wondering what you think of that, and is that a good idea considering some of the problems that Bashir is having right now?
Thanks, Scott.
Well, concerning Copts, I'm personally very much interested in this issue, and I've been very much involved through different types of NGOs since I was in my youth, when I was a student in the university with the Coptic question. And our party have 23% of its membership from the Copts, which is the highest ever percentage in any party or organization or farm or company or anything in Egypt. The Copts has been suffering with different degrees also. During Mubarak, they suffered a lot from different things. During the SCAF, they also suffered. You remember what happened in Maspero incident and all this. During Morsi, it was the worst period, and after Morsi, it was a catastrophe where several hundred churches were burned, and it was impossible until now, because of the lack of complete security, particularly in the southern part of Egypt. They are having problems. We are trying to help as much as we want. We write, and persist, and we demonstrate, and we do all what we can to support Egyptian Copts. This is, personally for me and for the party, is a very important and essential and basic thing for us. It will take time to solve these problems, and this issue of religion in a country where people are very religious, both Muslims and Christians are extremely religious. These issues are inflammable, and anything can start a major problem at any time. Concerning Bashir, well, all my life I've been opposing the Muslim Brotherhood since I was a student in the university. So I've been now over 40 years. I've been in opposition to the Muslim Brothers. So I'm not been very happy to cooperate with another Muslim brother regime. But as a president of the country, you might cooperate with the help. I mean, this is politics. So whatever good for Egypt should be done. And I don't know if it was good or bad at that time. I didn't know.
Yes, ma'am, right here.
Thanks, Manara Ghanim, Middle East News Agency. First of all, I highly appreciate your presentation, Dr. Aboulghar, and I want to ask you about the Egyptian political parties. Don't you think, first of all, what are your plans for your party to run for the coming parliamentary elections? Because you said it is more important than the presidential election, so what are your plans? Secondly, don't you think that the Egyptian political parties are still weak in order to rally their ranks, in order to, for example, up till now, they don't have a presidential candidate. They cannot agree on a presidential candidate. So they are still not playing on the ground. They have no power on the ground so far. So what's your comment about the Egyptian political parties? Thanks.
For the past 60 years, political parties were banned in Egypt. And Sadat decided to form 3 parties. He formed them, not the people. And when one of these parties decided to be a real party by making just 2,000 people gathering in Alexandria, he immediately said this is not allowed. So there were no political parties in Egypt. Mubarak in the early 90s formed 45 new political parties. Each one of them received £500,000 a year, and the membership was between 5 and 10 people for each party. And that's why, just for him to be happy when he comes to America, say we have 50 political parties and they are all opposing and etc. So the real political parties were formed after the revolution. So they are all 2-year-old parties. And when they went into the election in 2012, they had 25% of the parliamentary seats. And they were all less than 3 months old parties. The problem now is that the Egyptian authorities, ever since 52, they don't like the word political parties. And either they ban them completely, or they have the system like the Soviet bloc one-party system, etc., etc., etc. And now we are in a very similar situation. Now the coming parliament will be important and very decisive in making the future of Egypt and future policy. If there are strong political parties, not very strong, but reasonably strong political parties, there will be a say for the people in the parliament. And my feeling that different forms of powers in Egypt, they are not happy with this. So they are always talking about weak parties in all television, all things. They are not existing, they are not there, they are not present there, but they never tested them, really. And they are creating a law for the elections, for the parliamentary elections, which will show that these parties are weak. We are, all the political parties are asking for something similar to the parliamentary elections in Northern Europe, in Germany, in Israel, where the proportional list system is there, where you go and vote for the party and not for the person. And if this system is applied, at least for half of the seats, the political parties will have a very good representation in the coming parliament. But they don't, the Mubarak people, they don't want this. The security police in Egypt, they don't want this. They don't want to see people, free people in the parliament saying what they want. They want to go back to the single seats, small seats, so tribes, tribal family organizations and arrangement in the countryside will succeed in gaining most of the seats in the parliament. The parliament will be fragmented, so again the power will go to the president. And the balance of power which we fought for in the Committee of 50, which I'm honored to be one of them, will be lost by having this type of parliament. We urge the Egyptian government and we urge everybody in Egypt to have a good parliamentary election law which gives the chances for the parties to become bigger, because our constitution, new constitution, says that this is a country, a democratic country. Its political system is based on parties, it's exchanging of power, and it continues to change. How can we do this change of power without having political parties and giving them a chance? Thank you. It's a very good question.
Over here on this side.
Thanks. Andrew Holland with the American Security Project here. I cover energy and environmental policy. And I was just reading this morning, actually, in the release of the IPCC report about climate change. One of the things that it mentioned was they expect reduced flows on the Blue Nile due to a combination of climate change and upstream water development for irrigation and hydropower. Somebody earlier had touched on Ethiopia and the issues with dams. Egypt is kind of uniquely vulnerable because it only has the single water source at Nile. And what do you see for a future government on how to use that water better from the Nile and relations with its upstream neighbors regarding water usage?
Well, I think that the problem of the Ethiopia dam is very, very serious to Egypt and its future. And in one aspect, it may be fair for Ethiopia to build a dam to produce energy, but it is unfair for this dam to prevent water coming to Egypt. I went to Ethiopia with a group of NGOs, independent Egyptians, and we met President or Prime Minister Zenawi before he died. He was in power at that time. That was after the revolution. And we met different people explaining the rights of Egypt, and we may cooperate together to find a solution in the middle which will not deprive Ethiopia from electricity and will not deprive Egypt from water. And I was told that the President Mubarak, he could prevent building this dam by using his authorities with the Arab world and with some of the big powers in the West to make pressure on the funding agencies and the know-how areas. So actually he delayed starting this dam for many years. And during the 3-year period of the revolution, where there was a no man's land, SCAF, Muslim Brothers, irregular interim governments, all this, then the dam started to be built. I think the whole world should cooperate to find a fair solution for this problem. Because if the problem is not sorted in a fair way, and Egypt has definitely lots of rights in historical and by special international agreements, this will create a big mess in the area, and the reaction of different partners could be out of hand. So I think this is a duty of the West, duty of the United States to interfere in this issue objectively to prevent that this dam will harm Egypt in any way.
This man right here.
My name is Elena Haldov Romero. I work for the European Parliament here in Washington. I wanted to go back to the election campaigns, the two of them actually. In that,
Parliamentary or presidential?
both of them.
Okay.
Wondering how you see the situation would be for the different political parties to campaign. How free will you be to carry out your campaigns in both of them? And does for example, the sentences of last week affect the political climate in which you work, even if you're not directly targeted, also for the other political parties?
I didn't catch up the last sentence.
The last sentence was about the death sentences issued last week. Does things like this affect the climate in which you work as political parties, even if you're not the direct target?
The death sentences that were last week.
The death sentence, yes.
Practice.
I think that's a very, very important and very important question. I was heading to Brussels from Cairo before coming here when I heard the news of this death penalty for 500 people, and I was really shocked. I called many people, and I knew that if you were shocked, and all of you are shocked, we are 10 times more shocked than you in Egypt. People are in a very bad state. They don't know what really happened. So it is terrible, it is unbelievable, and we do not accept this. Nobody in Egypt accepts this. Then I knew from description by the NGOs for human rights in Egypt who made a declaration with the exact detail of what happened in the court case. And that we as Egyptians are not allowed to comment on any court decision as a decision itself. That's why many parties could not write any declaration or anything. But what happened is very unusual in this court case, that on the first day there was a quarrel between the lawyers and the judge in this small place in the south of Egypt. And the lawyers presented a request to the judge to ask for changing the court. And this is a legal procedure in Egypt, allowed by law in Egypt. And this request should go to a higher court. It usually takes 3 weeks. And then the court decides if this is a really serious one, then they change the court, or they say no, go on in the same court. The judge did not transform this request according to the law, so this is illegal from the judge. And on the second day, he kicked out all the lawyers and the relatives of everybody outside, and he made that decision. So from the legal point of view, this decision is not valid, is zero. None of those people will have a death penalty. None of all this. This decision will be cancelled by the first court, which will meet, I don't know after how many days. And probably this judge will be himself, maybe he's going to lose his job, or I don't know. There will be judicial procedures for such type of extraordinary things, which we are all very unhappy about it. And I totally agree with you that this is disastrous, and for no reason we have enough problems for somebody to come and make another mess for us.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. All the way back on the left.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Lisa Wright. I'm a former congressional staffer and now an independent consultant. You talked about the media, the government media now having very little influence. I'm an English speaker, not an Arabic speaker, but for the benefit of those of us here who are either English or bilingual, I know it would be perhaps prejudicial for you to say that one media or another is one that you find the most credible, but could you share with us those media outlets or reporters who are considered credible in Egypt, both English language media as well as Arabic? And thank you.
Well, I can't say which is credible and which is not credible. And what I said that definitely none of them is completely credible. The government media is always biased to the leader. The same media was pro-Morsi and were pro-Mubarak and will be pro the coming president 100%, without any change. They will support him for everything he will do, right or wrong. And that was the same media, the same people, and that's why they are not credible. And nobody is really believing them in what they say. For a very, very short period after the revolution, they tried to go out of the box and to be a little bit independent, but that was only a matter of few weeks. And the same applies for the newspapers. Exactly. They are the same writers who were supporting Mubarak, were supporting Morsi, and then the army, and then so credibility is much better in the independent media. But the independent media are again not very credible on every aspect because they have their own agenda, because they have an ownership, and the ownership pushes them in certain directions. But credibility is related to persons. In this particular channel, satellite channel, Mr. X is a credible man or woman who makes a credible shock tours or news, and people, or everybody listen to them, and they are known by name in Egypt, and in their programs you will find most of the ads, because this shows that they have a really wide, people will look at them much more.
Could you share any of those names with us here?
Well, I can give you, but I don't like to say names because maybe I miss somebody who's really credible and I don't say, but I'll tell you some names right now.
Lisa, would you say who's more credible, CNN or Fox?
Well, I'm interested in if you have an opinion.
For the folks on CNN, well, the Democrats
for the
Democrats say that the CNN is credible and the Republicans say Fox is more credible. So that is the situation here.
Right, but for the English language services that are international but are carried here in the United States, for instance, Al Arabiya or Al Jazeera is.
But these are not Egyptians.
Yes,
These are Arabic satellites. I'm talking about the Egyptian satellites and Egyptian news media. I'm not talking about the Arab.
I realize that. I'm asking about English language reporting on Egypt that Americans would be exposed to, and those Egyptians.
Well, you have
are
reporters.
English
You have
speakers.
very good reporters everywhere, directly from all the. I mean, there are in Cairo. I receive regular calls from the Wall Street Journal, from New York Times reporters every day. They are there all around, all the time.
And are they influential with English-speaking Egyptians?
No.
There's an honest answer there. I think we can probably take one more question in this. Young lady right here.
Thank you. For the Egyptian English language, you can see Al-Masri Al-Yom website in English called Egypt Independence. It's called EgyptIndependence.com. Dr. Aboulghar, again, I want to ask about the role of the political parties regarding some of the issues that are facing Egypt, like, for example, the suspension of the US aid to Egypt. So how do you think that the Egyptian political parties can play a role in order to promote the Egyptian cause in the foreign world? Like, for example, your trip here is very important. I think it's very important for us to see you here. So what are the plans of the Egyptian political parties in this? And also for the tourism, how could you see that the Egyptian political parties can play a role in order to promote the Egyptian image, and how the security conditions could be improved? Thanks.
I'll first ask the second question, which was much easier. I mean, Egypt is very attractive country for tourism. If there is security, the day there is security in Egypt, the second day you will find the influx of hundreds of thousands of tourists in a minute. There will be no problem. Facilities are there, places are there, all types. We have more than half of the antiquities of the world. So that's the problem is that we are not able to secure Egypt now, and this is a problem which we have to find a way all together, not the political party, the government, the police, everybody in Egypt should work on this issue together. But the first question was the
suspension of aid to Egypt.
Well, the question of aid to Egypt, I mean, apart from the military aid, the volume was reduced gradually to a very small limit, which is not a very big issue now. I think it's more important is the confidence and the relation between the two countries as allies for many, many years, rather than a small amount of money. I met Mr. Burns during one of his visits to Egypt, and he asked me about how popular is the United States in Egypt. And I said that in all polls during the past 10, 15 years, Egypt was one of the least countries where the United States is in all the polls, before all these new changes and the Muslim Brothers and revolution and anything. But it was between 30 and 40% of the Egyptians, they think that the United States is a good country and is a good friend of Egypt. Not more than that, as compared to other Arab countries. Now, it's much, much less. And there were traditional groups of Egyptians who are pro-American and very supportive to America. The Coptic community, the business people, and lots of NGOs and certain organizations were very much traditionally, very much pro the United States and defending all the time the United States in all situations. Now, the Copts, they are very angry from the United States, even to the extreme. And I don't understand why they are that angry. And the business people, it said to us, oh, it's very low. And then he asked me the next question, what can we do to improve this? And I told him, I really didn't have an answer, but I told him one thing you could do is to help Egypt in combating terrorism in Sinai, and you announce this officially and openly, that you are going to provide Egypt with enough intelligence, new equipment which can detect. You have been in Afghanistan and fighting all these missions in this type of geography, and if you do this, this is one of the principles of the United States, that they want to combat terrorism anywhere in the world. Part of the terrorism in Sinai is coming from Afghanistan. There are Afghani people there. There are Yemeni, Somali, from all the people who came during the year of President Morsi, and they are settled there. And this will be not support for any government in Egypt or any president, but it's support for the Egyptian people and for the main cause and the real cause. United States has been fighting for it all the years before.
It's a great question, and it's a great answer as well. And on the tourism side, when we were there in December, we went and visited tourist sites, and I felt totally safe. It's again a matter of depending on where you want to go. If you want to find trouble, you can probably find trouble. You can do the same thing here. If you want to run around the Sinai as a tourist, you might want to be careful about your destination. But I felt totally safe there in December, and I did have friends that said I was crazy to go, and I think it was so grossly exaggerated, the security situation. And again, we went to Tahrir Square. We were fine. We walked all over the place unescorted. Totally safe. Again, if you want to find trouble, you can find it, but you can do the same here in Washington, D.C. So I think the press, again, harps on one or two incidents and makes it sound like there's total unrest when that's not even remotely close to the situation. And I would say here in the United States, if you want to go visit Egypt at this time is the right time to go because they want tourism and they're attractive and there's some great bargains, some great places to go. And
It's very cheap now.
you're cheap and you're totally safe. So I think it's the perfect time to go, but that's my plug for Egypt. And the aid thing, again here, when you look at the factions within the United States that influence foreign aid, and when you have what some would call a coup, others, the word that I've heard used that I kind of like is popular impeachment, but here that's not welcomed too well, so then you get those factions up on Capitol Hill. But I think the best that can be done is have a good presidential election, have a good parliamentary election, keep the trouble down, and I was very gratified to hear your comments about the sentences in that business. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I'm glad you brought it up. I think your answers have been stimulating, and I really, really appreciate you coming today, and I appreciate everybody in here today. You've been a great audience. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.